How much freedom do you have to decide, like, what films you want to make, what you want to say, and how do you go about it, and so forth?
Well, maybe I'll just start. I think because the nature of my work has nothing to do with getting approval from the establishment, so I completely don't work within that premise and format, and I just do what I can get away with and what I can think up or even amass that kind of the actors who are willing to play the parts, and basically that's just what I'm about. And I think if you watch those films, they're in the period of 2004 to 2009. Definitely in the last 4 years, I think I would say that Singapore has changed a lot, and especially with the whole social network culture and the internet. So I think when I made my first film, it really felt like it was quite radical for myself, you know, to openly shoot that kind of a subject. But I'm sure in today's context, you know, things just have a fast pace forward a little bit and things get more adventurous.
Well, I make films, I think, for very different reasons from Chris. I think I want my films to be seen in Singapore, and I think a lot of what I treasure is access. I want the films to be accessible. I want them to communicate something to people, especially people I care about. At least that was the starting point for me when I wanted to make these films. It's really to bridge something with what I believe. People like my parents, for example, whom I hope could have their minds open a little bit and see things a little differently. So for me, it's all about finding that point of entry to make it accessible. And which is why I very much work within that framework. But then where I can, I nudge it as much as I can.
Yeah. And how do you find, like, when you guys start making films, like back in 2004, I mean, even in your early film, you were starting to question, like in the film, you know, show someone questioning gender, questioning what's love and so forth. How did you find, like, audiences were reacting to it, and what kind of responses were you getting from people around you?
I only showed my films mainly in Germany, in Berlin for the festival, except for the third, which was made for the local census. I didn't bother to submit that. And I think the German audiences were a little amused, and maybe because I think the earlier films, actually most of them are quite contextual, so I think it must have puzzled them a little bit with respect to certain references that I made. I think they just found the films mildly amusing. For myself, it's more like a personal thing that I want to document in terms of a statement, in terms of emotion, in terms of encounters, actually, because it's a big challenge for me to source actors of this nature, people who I can trust. I mean, you can actually hire an actor and pay the actor, but in Singapore you never can tell. I mean, they can turn around and go to the police and that's it. So I mean, basically the people that I filmed are people I definitely could trust. And for me, it's a personal satisfaction of getting away doing something I want to do, irrespective of whether anyone approves or not.
Can we just clarify, when you said they could turn around and go to the police, what kind of, I guess, what's the worst case scenario if that did happen?
Well, if that happens, I would imagine that the police will come to my house, they will raid my house, take away my computer, that sort of a thing, you know.
Even if you've shot it not for sale, or even if it's just for private?
As long as somebody complains, because that is basically what Singapore is about.
Right.
Singapore is pretty big on accountability. So if nobody complains, it's fine, you know.
Right.
But if somebody complains, that's it. But from what I heard as well, you can actually make porn in Singapore, but you're not allowed to distribute it.
See, that's the funny thing. I heard this comment. Somebody told me, "Oh, prostitution is actually legal, but you just cannot solicit." So I was like,
Well, yeah, they call it the prohibitive approach. It's not like it's not like it's forbidden, but they just prohibit it as much as they can.
right.
I think they view it as something that's practical.
Okay. Okay. And Junfeng, what about yourself when you were making your films, and what kind of responses were you getting from your peer group or the industry? And
I mean, fairly positive ones. I think. Well, when I made that film in Barcelona when I was 19, and then I don't think people expected me to make a film like that. In fact, that sort of became a very personal process for me. It ended up becoming sort of my coming out process, which I think. I mean, they are personal films as well, but I think they are made to sort of reach out to the people around me, I think. And interestingly, I think with such an approach and over the years, sort of understanding how to do something like that, that also kind of informed other things I was involved with, like the Pink Dot movement, and the ideology behind Pink Dot, for example, and the videos as well, which I directed. So it's all about finding these points of entry and making it accessible and palatable.
yeah.
I think, and I think that's what I've been working on for
I think you're right in the sense that when you say palatable, but you haven't. I think they're very relatable. I think the stories that you're telling are very much based on like a narrative that you can pick up on things that you think that's a very human reaction to something. I can understand that, and certainly I think with the one with I think it's Kaloa Bars when he comes home and there's this disconnect with the parents, and certainly I've experienced that, like being away and going home, and then you just realize that there's a certain sort of cultural way of communicating where this one talks this way, and sort of, and the thing that you're excited about you can't quite share, and there's something about Asian families in that context. So that's very, very relatable. That way.
But I think, it's also unfortunate that, watching Chris's film, it's very liberating. Really, I think just watching them and seeing that, someone like Chris has been making works like that since 2003 and 2004. I think it is in a way unfortunate that to be able to bridge, sex and sexual desires are very human too, but people just refuse to see it or acknowledge it, and that we have to find points of entry like love, family, and in a way reclaim these terms and reclaim these catchphrases, so that it is made accessible to the public. But I think in principle, sex is just as
Sometimes, on one hand I say I don't really care what people think, but I guess sometimes if I think about it, it's like what I was saying in the fourth film, Allen Ginsberg, towards the end about how first world should accept pornography, and I guess through that little comment, I guess in the back of my head I must be trying to engage Singapore, as it were, without positively, constructively engaging, that they ought to come to this so-called more enlightened standpoint. So maybe at the end of it all, despite what I say that I don't care, maybe I do care.
Well, it's certainly, I think it's when the personal has become engaging with the political, and in a way you come to that point where it's the sexuality, the body, you can't get away from it, and that's the thing you're trying to address. There's certainly something very anarchic and joyous about your film. So when I first watched it, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, wow, this was made in 2004. Where was I? I didn't know this existed. So and I needed to process it as well, and whether it was just my own being taken out of my own comfort zone. I had never seen that many penises so long staring at them. You know? But then it made me question myself, like, why am I uncomfortable with this? Why am I challenged by this? And then over a duration of and thinking about it, then you become okay with it. You know, like when he starts dancing with the stuff, you start accepting it as a scene.
Yeah.
You know, so
maybe I'm at the heart of it. Maybe if you analyze it, maybe I'm afraid to care. Maybe I want to care, but I'm afraid to care because I know about all the rules and all the what they call out-of-bound markers, OB markers, and I'm sure even for Junfeng, even for what you call a more acceptable mainstream filmmaker like himself, we're both trying to toe the line when it comes to filmmaking, as to what we can get away with, literally, basically, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like Tanjong Ru, I mean, I'm glad we showed mine first before we showed his. But no, I mean, for a film like that where there is hardly even a kiss, you know, and it's already rated R21. I mean, and this is already with a very healthy relationship that I have with the MDA, which is essentially Singapore's film funding body, which is also the censorship body. And going back and forth in their offices talking, because I wanted to release my compilation of short films on DVD, and R21 films are not allowed on DVD, so I wanted to lower the rating of the film to M18. But I asked them, is there anything you'd like to cut from it? Because there's absolutely nothing to cut from it. It's a thematic thing that they were against. Yeah. So, you know, even with that conversation, you know, they refused to budge. And so when that threshold is there,
it's so embedded in a way.
I mean,
I think it's a bit hard for European audiences like in England to understand, but even just today I actually got an email from the radio station that I worked with. I was reminded, it was a circular that went out to everybody, to all the staff, that we're not allowed to promote or even mention a film on air that's rated M18 or R21.
Oh, really?
You're not allowed to mention.
Okay. I actually think of a lot of M18 films.
I know, it may sound like really ridiculous or even unthinkable to people here, but that's really the truth of the matter back home in Singapore. We are still what we call a very conservative society.
How great a part do you think having different religious sort of sections, you know, being close, say, to Malaysia, where I think in Muslim countries you still can't even show a kiss, or this very strong sort of Christian right in Singapore. How big a factor do you think that is?
I think Singapore is always a little bit feeling like they're in a dilemma. On the one hand, they want to progress like a first world country, but on the other hand, they are pretty conservative in the sense that they want to seem to respect the respective religions, the different religions that we have. And you know, the Muslim religion tends to be a bit more conservative, and so they are always caught in that little bit of a dilemma, I think. They know it, and I think they're working the best way around it, I guess, you know, because caught between like making money, being a commercial city, and at the same time a society that is very big on values. I think we're at that sort of a crossroad.
Is there any more questions before I sort of keep rabbiting on? Anyone with questions for either? Yes, Rizal.
Yes. First, I will to say great film is nice, and because today's composition is not about how much film we see, but we have two different perspectives about how to making film here. It's very great, and I have a question for Mr. Boo. Yeah. I like you making film, how you inspiring by your, you know, the nearest thing in your life, like father, your grandma, your young sister also. And the question is, after 7 years, they have a lot of inspiring you. And the first question is, how about your relation with your father now? What are you feeling with your father Are you in your film? I'm feeling that you are hate so much with your father. Do you still hate it, or what do you feel now? I just want to know. After 7 years, after all the things inspired you.
I love my father.
Yeah, please.
Sorry it came across that way, but no. I think it is the patriarchy. I think that is the issue here. It's not so much my relationship with my father. I think
Yeah.
we do have a very healthy relationship. I think it is true that like even with my feature film, it is about a father being a former political detainee, and how this young man needs to come to terms with that. And actually, with my next film, there are also the protagonist has a lot of daddy issues as well. But I think it's more about the kind of patriarchal Confucius society that we live in, I suppose.
You have a very big father figure in Singapore, I won't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rejection of that. I think
And the
that's
rejection.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Anybody else with a question?
Can I ask about the role of the grandmother in all your films as a grandmother, rather than a mother?
Again, not very not intentional. I think I was quite close to my grandmother, and with these few characters, and actually a lot of it was inspired because of that old lady that I worked with. I was saying I went to Busan for this workshop with Ho Xiaoxian, and I learned a lot about working with non-actors, with non-professional actors, and I worked with her on an omnibus feature film because she's partially blind, and I went to the Association of the Visually Handicapped in Singapore, and I sat there for a whole day looking for an old lady I could work with, and then she was just this amazing, charismatic woman, and after working with her on that film, I wanted to work with her again, and so that's why I put her in Kalua Baris, and then after that again in Tanjong Rhu with a minor role. So it's really more about her more than anything else. Yeah. And then with my feature film, Sandcastle, the idea of dementia and personal memory for a grandmother, and how, you know, essentially it's the parallels between personal memory and social memory, and what in Singapore we choose to remember and what we choose to forget.
Yeah.
So that is a more thematic thing for Sandcastle.
So going back to the wider issue in Singapore and filmmaking, in both your opinions, like what do you think, what do you think what can be done? What should we do to kind of keep encouraging filmmaking, to keep encouraging people to maybe push the boundaries a little so that issues can be discussed because they're there whether we like it or not, and is film a good medium to do that?
It goes back to my original point that it's a very funny question, because on the one hand, Singapore is not being discouraging in any way. I think there's a lot of encouragement of young talent and aspiring filmmakers out there. But on the other hand, they also have all these restrictions that are very forthright in your face, and I guess if that continues, it's pushing Singapore into an area whereby people will be trying to skirt those what do you call it, those OB markers, and try to do something that they want to do, I guess.
I'm not actually familiar with this term, OB markers.
It's a very popular Singapore
Out
term.
of bound markers.
Out of bound markers.
Out of bounds.
For real? Like,
For real.
they say that to you?
Yeah, well, okay, I have the famous quote for it.
Huh.
There was one time when a journalist asked the state minister, saying that, because Singapore has so many invisible out-of-bound markers, so would you not care to define OB markers so that we can be more, we could understand better what OB markers are, what they are? And the state minister actually said, it is not possible to define out-of-bound markers because once you choose to define it, others will play around it and say that they're not offending the law. So in other words, what he is saying on behalf of Singapore is, we don't need the law to
Just
control you.
uncover.
Yes.
Right, but I guess I'm just surprised because to me that sounds like a colloquial thing that people would say, but actually ministers say that.
Yeah,
Like that's
it's
outside of OB.
markers. Yeah. It's a
Okay. Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah.
standard issue.